An unfulfilled and unsatiated desire can be a very scary and lacerating thing. Being possessed by a single desire for something so essential that without it you can't live, that yet can't even be expressed, let alone fulfilled, can drive a person to the brink of folly. Complying with the wishes of relatives, adapting to the expectations of society, are all stratagems that we humans use to feel accepted, to not have to worry about, amongst many things, other people's perception and judgment of us, and avoid conflict. And while such a prospect often sounds appealing, there is however a cost to pay for this acceptance, and that is the diminishment of one's own worth for the sake of making oneself lovable, instead of being loved. These are ways with which we try to fulfill something that is constitutive of humanity, and with which we try to push away something that is equally inseparable from life. Here I'm referring to the desire to be loved and the fear of being left alone, respectively. Making oneself lovable is synonymous with trying to avoid conflict and adapting to what we think others may want us to be, depending on the environment we'll grow up in. So, the focus of this love is entirely external, and relationships that originate from those feelings of lack can often but be one-sided. Feeling loved, or being loved, on the other hand, is not related to the external, but it's related to the self. Being loved means feeling understood as a person and wanted for who you are, and this time this love is able to generate a mutual relationship between equals. It is a warm light that is internally born from the fact that both parties give a fragment of themselves to the other who takes care of it, and it is this care that makes a person feel whole and safe. These distinctions immediately appear clearer and more thematically relevant for Farnese's character if we focus on her story and Berserk itself as a whole. Farnese, like the majority of the most prominent characters in Miura's work, lives with a hole in her heart, and that hole is what gives her and the other characters a motivation to act to try to fill it. It's one of Berserk's main themes. The emptiness born from some kind of injustice that the environment we were thrown into thrusts upon us. And such injustice can even simply be the imperfection of man and of the world in which we live. The youngest Van Diemen child, in fact, has experienced the aforementioned void since an early age. Her father didn't pay her much attention, nor was he ever capable of such a thing, as his wife tells us. Having a father who, being completely absorbed in work, didn't allow himself to see his daughter for more than once a year because of his own fear of sad girl's fits, during which she seemed almost possessed, Farnese was abandoned by him because of the anxiety her unpredictable behavior caused him to feel. So gradually, in the heart of a young Farnese, a hole opened, a void that feasted on her fear and multiplied it as a consequence of both parents' emotional neglect. This is the crux of Farnese's character. Her serious and austere demeanor that suddenly transforms in tears, regret, self-doubt, and compliancy finds its reason to be in said neglect. In order to receive the attention and the affection that children require by nature, Farnese tried to unconditionally obey to her father's will, and whilst she was becoming more and more desperate in the hope of having a moment where he would listen to her, she continued trying to make her father happy as much as she could to feel that, although superficial or even illusory, sense of acceptance and of love. Such a moment, however, as to be expected, never came. Due to Farnese's father's nature and the crippling fear that Farnese felt at the mere idea of speaking her mind out to him. Farnese grew up in the solitude of fake and ambiguous safety, whilst in the depths of her consciousness, voiceless in her own house, a greater fear was rapidly emerging. One night, screams that could be heard from her room on the last floor, terrifying, ceaseless, stimulated her childish curiosity to get downstairs and unravel the loud mystery. In front of her, she found terror. The terror of those that were being burned, and of those that were burning them, all screaming to express or to escape their own fear. Timid step after timid step, she reached the loud noise in the bright fields. Then a mysterious hand silently told her to take the torch, and like so, she took that torch, and immediately tossed it into the fire, and the shadows danced. Then she took another torch, and another one still, and the shadows danced once more for each one of them. Then Farnese was commended for her pristine faith and behavior. What she learned that night was that indulging in that terror and wielding it, becoming one with it and with the crowd, was the way to escape it. She learned this was the right thing to do, or maybe we should say the necessary thing to do to survive. From that day on, Farnese stopped listening to herself. She stopped existing as herself. Her voice had become imperceptible even to her own ears, because nobody ever cared enough to listen to her, and her worth as a human started being solely defined by her obedience to Father. Having internalized this rejection, her unconditional obedience to her biological father transformed into an unconditional allegiance and loyalty to the duties imposed to her by her social position, the aristocratic society, and by the church, of which she had become a member of great symbolic importance. In this moment of her life, the institutions with which she was trying to fill her soul were giving her an accepted, pre-constructed identity, a sense of belonging and therefore, although false, a sense of being loved and wanted. Maybe it isn't an exaggeration to say that, in these times, her ecclesiastical duties were the only thing that could make her feel alive. Such an artificial identity and sense of purpose, however, weren't natural. They were crafted. They were a byproduct of a survival instinct. Without her noticing, Farnese's life was being dedicated to the blind service of the authorities, whose compliments noise was covering her timid inner voice more and more, and the louder the voice of the facade became, the fainter and more annoying, even to her own ears, that voice of the girl she used to be became. So, Farnese ended up silencing herself to find some peace, some safety. Deep down, Farnese feels like she's an insignificant woman, because nothing she does is a desire of her own. She feels that what she has is everything she is, because that's all she knows. Superficial obedience to avoid suffering. Deep down, she knows that she is just the sum of all her lies. She thinks she's a hollow woman, because ultimately, for her, the institutions she adheres herself to are hollow themselves. To summarize, we can say that right now, in Farnese's heart, there are two holes. The first one is the hole of the lack of care in her childhood, and the second one is the hole of those who can't be who they are. The first of said holes had been momentarily filled by the praises of the adults around her and a feeble bond with her father. On the other hand, the second hole was being filled by the role given to her by the institutions. Namely, the church, it was mainly what gave her a home and people to lead, so that she could be led. Her said institutions were also a psychological substitute for her father to comply to and to please, and with which to survive her loneliness and fear. What is sad to see is how the girl she used to be never had the chance to fully come into being, to fully be born. She could never truly grow or find out her predispositions, her preferences, and maybe a lot of that girl might have seriously been lost forever. But luckily for her, changing a person on such a fundamental level is not so easy, especially in her case. For the true Farnese, or what sadly merely remains of her, is all concentrated in one small little flame that wants to come out. It yearns to be seen. This flame is the one thing of hers that certainly was not lost throughout her life of terror, and although remaining at an infantile, confused, and almost primitive level, it still retains her genuine desire to be seen for who she is, and to be born spiritually. Such an indomitable desire of hers is like a flame that suddenly, chaotically reignites every time it is about to become one with the ashes, symbolizing the sheer strength and intensity of her past wish of existing as Farnese. However, such a strong, intense, pure desire that had to be repressed times and times on end cannot be hidden for long, nor can a person capable of such passion stay healthy or even sane forever without expressing it. This self-demonization was the way Farnese's psyche found to solve the intrinsical contradiction of being unable to be herself and wanting to be genuinely loved and exist. This unsolvable conflict between self and others is the cause for her feelings of shame and the attempts to deny and repress herself. Consequently, the way that girl tries to be seen and to see herself has assumed a twisted and perverse form. Hurting others, being hurt, and hurting herself are the only way, given her circumstances, that her mind found to feel a more genuine connection with another person. When Farnese tortures heretics or punishes herself, she feels gratification for her obedience to the substitute of her uncaring father, which leads to her sense of safety, and when she burns them at the stake, she is reminded of the warmth she felt as a child, the warmth of being part of a crowd and not having to fear anyone anymore, as she feels everyone applauding her for doing what she was supposed to do, having become one with terror itself. What is special about these moments is that they are characterized by the cracking of Farnese's rigid persona of the commander fully dedicated to her mission of faith. Flagellation and self-flagellation are extremely intimate moments for her. They are intimate because the rational control of her very vigilant persona and psyche gradually and momentarily dissolves, thus letting out a forbidden, deeper, irrational side of hers. In these brief instances that are almost instinctual and primitive, hence why they're the most authentic, a fissure opens in Farnese's heart, from which the still immature and clumsy true Farnese can try to come out and see someone and be seen. When she comes out into the open, she's like a child that looks around after committing a mischief, checking if someone noticed her, and when she notices herself, that forbidden side of hers, she's ashamed of herself, because not being seen, hiding is safety, so she has learned. And if you also take into account the perverse and desperate way in which her heart has turned out and manifests in her young maturity, you'll see that there's also an extra layer of sinfulness and regret coming from the fact that such acts, and so again her true self, would be unacceptable for the church. However, secretly, this perverse desire is a refusal, a rebellion, and a scream of anguish and of hope for a liberation. From such explosive subconscious energy, Farnese gradually comes closer and closer to her breaking point and the occasion to find a path of self-understanding, truth, and self-discovery. Because with this fervent irrational passion, she also rejects the very faith that she was carrying in her heart by inertia, to make herself lovable instead of trying to be loved. Now, this is a plot point that has had me perplexed for quite a long time, and for this reason the character of Nina has remained a small mystery for me for a while. But now I think I can articulate an interpretation of why Miura presented the carnal desires and pleasures in a way that hints to them having a dualistic complementary nature to fear and terror, which are the main themes of the Conviction arc and Berserk as a whole. My question was, why would such a primitive instinct be a way to alleviate and escape the fear of the unknown these characters experience? My personal take is that these moments of intimacy, genuine or otherwise, are characterized by a vulnerability that emerges with which, as I said before, rational control weakens, and all the masks of duty and of ego fade away. Such conditions are the perfect catalyst for an unexpressed and repressed soul to come to the surface, for the immersion of a side of the self that usually stays hidden even to consciousness. And with the reached ecstasy, ancient Greek for exiting one's body, oneself, one arrives to a mental state where everything disappears, where everything is undifferentiated, where man manages to demolish the confines between physical entities and mental states, where everything congregates in one single moment that makes one forget everything in the chaotic peace of the Dionysian elation. In Farnese's specific case, through physical and psychological torture, Farnese complies to, reconciles with, and rejects her duty and her heart for the sake of her mental stability and sanity. She complies because she tortures and burns heretics like she's expected to. She reconciles her desire of identity and being loved with her duty, but in a way she also rejects all those things, or you could say that they become a pretext to let that true flame of hers burn and hope and yearn from life in the outside world. The main point, and good news for the youngest Van Diemen's character journey, is that this means that she has not fully been silenced yet, and she still hasn't forsaken herself. She hasn't become one with duty or structures yet, with the Father. Farnese's unfulfilled wish to be loved and to live has been hidden in a shadow of shame and sin. With time passing, he became bigger and bigger, and more desperate, thus becoming inexhaustible lust. In this new unacceptable form, her desire was filled with sadness, loneliness and pain, and it transformed into something truly perverse, almost like confirming to her that her true self really is disgusting and depraved. So the church, the institutions, and her father are right in the end. I am not in the wrong, because I'm doing as I was told, which is right. Those things can't exist, therefore I am wrong. They mustn't exist, because if they did, my fragile peace and my small world would be shattered to pieces, so I am wrong. But then, in a night of darkness, she meets Guts. After witnessing the demons swarming in copious numbers around Guts from dusk to dawn, and being possessed by one of them, Farnese inevitably sees and learns the harsh truth about the world of Berserk, and of her own soul. And now, with her broken persona, her deeper self made conscious, and after the encounter with the man that uncovered the truth she had been kept away from, Farnese's new awakening and liberation became almost fated. After her first reaction of disgust and anger towards the Black Swordsman, Farnese becomes more and more fascinated with the man, and although there is sometimes the hint of the nature of her feelings being romantic in the story, I still think that there can be found an extra layer of meaning as well. The way I interpret Farnese's infatuation with the gods is that Farnese's feelings originate from the fact that Guts is precisely what Farnese yearns to be. Guts is a free spirit that embodies freedom both in thought and in deed, and these traits of his are shown in everything he does and says. Guts doesn't explicitly bring any hope, nor does he promise anything to anyone, and yet Farnese can't help but feel safe hearing him talk. This fascinates Farnese at such a deep level that at first she doesn't comprehend such feelings at all herself. For me, Guts is showing Farnese the part of her that is inside her, the part she's still missing, the part of her that is struggling to come to the surface. After all, Guts doesn't command or ask anything of anyone, and most importantly, he doesn't wear masks himself. When Farnese sees the truth about the world and herself, thanks to Guts, she is completely physically naked, which symbolizes her naked soul being exposed to the truth without any armor, without any facades. This nakedness, and being possessed by a demon which further weakens rational control, forces Farnese to face a new vulnerability, a vulnerability she's not used to, being vulnerable with herself. Of course, this is a feeling she's not acquainted to, and as a result she's afraid of it, and so she projects, denies and rejects. On the other hand, Guts is still dressed, so to show that this is Farnese's personal journey of self-awareness, that is initiated by a unique infatuation that is extremely intimate, personal and meaningful for Farnese. A true passion born during her second night of terror. This time, however, she is reminded that although this is a world of darkness, this is also a world where the sun does rise as well. So finally, for the first time, she was seen. She saw herself, and she was disgusted. It is no coincidence that her first reaction to the events of that night were denial, and her feelings towards Guts were scorn and anger, because she saw the forbidden, something that can't and should not exist, the miracles of the world of which Guts was both a witness and a prophet. Guts was in fact the witness and a prophet of two harsh, forbidden truths. And at first, this earns him Farnese's scorn and anger, as I said, because that revelation caused a crisis both in Farnese's heart and in her mind, which at this point are both close to crumble and collapse. This is why I think that Guts embodies what Farnese already is on the inside. Guts indirectly forces her to confront everything that threatens her fragile inner peace, which simultaneously wants to be shaken, it wants to be challenged. Seeing her own lies, her own insignificance, this she is most ashamed and afraid of. But with a gust that comes from the irrational and the unknown, that takes the forms of true terror and a strange but not any less deep form of love, Guts inadvertently reignites Farnese's inner flame one last time. From now on, her yearning for truth and freedom will only grow stronger and stronger. Absolute submittance and timid defiance, blind faith and courageous doubt, cold poise and burning passion. Maybe it is this very ambiguity, this chaotic and indomitable nature of Farnese's soul, that she is an enigma for her father. For, as his wife explains, he doesn't have the strength to accept what he is unable to control or to comprehend based on his personal standards. Farnese's father, in fact, completely identifies with the mentality of the doctrine of the physical world, which, as Shirke explains, can create a rather rigid cognitive bias on what is believed possible and what is believed real by a person, and this is a bias that can become very deeply rooted and difficult to change later in life. Farnese was always protected from the world. It was subtracted from her, thus not allowing her to grow. This is why her heart hasn't hardened. She hasn't developed a rigid mindset, and her character wasn't molded by the external world on a fundamental level. She is indeed a free spirit, just like Guts, who deeply rejects the idea of being solely defined by hatred and his quest for revenge. Farnese's heart has stayed mostly pure and true to its core, although momentarily repressed, and is like that of a child. Thanks to her delicate sensitivity and the intensity of her desire, her heart was saved from a slow, comfortable death. She always dreamed, always yearned for something else, a world where after the terror and the darkness, the sun rises and shines upon the cold earth, which means that the flame of her heart was never fully extinguished, and given the right opportunities, it was able to grow bigger and warmer, gradually melting some of the metaphorical snow of her childhood that had covered her defenseless soul. And now that she has found the courage to live and a family that wants her to, she won't let go of any of it. It is just as appropriate as it is touching that Farnese would choose to become a witch and learn magic. In Berserk, magic is a metaphor for the inner world, the world of personal perceptions, an intuitive vision completely unique to each one of us, from which we can try to understand ourselves and the world by creating an inner map of said world. By learning magic, a power system defined as a learning of the world from one's own world, it is like Farnese is finally reconnecting with her inner child, to rediscover all that was inside her, finally freed from fear, judgment, and shame. Now, that timid seed that an infant is can meet with the external world. It can accept the warmth of the sunlight without being blinded by it. That seed is finally able to slowly bloom, relegating the past to the past, thus becoming an individual. Oftentimes, though, instead of cultivating our true selves, we give up on ourselves. on that inner realm of perceptions, imagination and intuition in favor of structures and ways of thinking that, being more rigid than usual, can give us a sense of safety, but are ultimately incapable of summing up the multiplicity and nuances of existence or people. Berserk's magical power system, embodied by Shirka, represents and shows the absence of definitive answers in this world and within the pragmatic systems of human coexistence. And about the safety of said conventions and systems, Farnese's character and story ask the following questions. Is such safety really safe? When is it true safety, or just us wanting to believe it is true safety? Is it worth it to comply and believe this safety even when we are just trying to be lovable and not be loved? And what does it really mean to be loved then? A pure desire and a blazing passion and an enormous courage in front of the unknown and the terrifying is what Farnese is. A young woman that defied reason and her upbringing, never averting her eyes from her doubts and fears, and for her courage and pure heart, she was rewarded when her true destiny that she, out of her own volition, decided to follow found her. She decided to free herself from the chains of ignorance, consuetude, and from the expectations and obligations placed upon her by a world that made her believe that all she could do was cower and be small, hiding from and complying to everything. Her father was too scared of all of this, of her magic, that is to say, the extraneity of his daughter, whom he estranged because all that she represents is the opposite of what he is. After all, he is one with a rigid worldview, that's all he knows. For this reason, to try to love her, he rejected her, further starving her heart, thus leading her to being lost in herself, just like him. And yet, with the one thing that was true to her since her very birth, Farnese was able to forge for herself a life where she's surrounded by people that are grateful to and genuinely affectionate to her, everything that the girl she used to be wished for. Now, her flame doesn't burn in a desperate solitude and segregation. Now, that flame is safe from every storm and every blizzard, because Farnese made it her own. And now, it doesn't have to burn in folly, because it is surrounded by the authentic warmth of all those flames that together form a bonfire of souls. Many thanks for watching.